Welcome everyone once again to a new episode of the Game Sense Football Podcast, where we, your hosts, Ewan and Nas, ramble on about the things that matter to us in the world of football, or soccer, as some of you might call it. So Nas, just want to know, who were the players you were actually most excited about watching, growing up?
Well, when I was a kid, my two favorite players were always Ryan Giggs and Paolo Maldini, but I was always fascinated by playmakers like Riquelme, like Totti, like a younger Baggio, you know?
Ah, interesting. So actually, for me, when I was growing up in the late 90s, the Serie A was actually on TV a lot during the heyday of the Serie A when they still had money. And I actually got to watch quite a lot of players like you mentioned Baggio, Rui Costa as well. When he was in Fiorentina, I started
Mm.
watching him. He went over to Milan later on. Alessandro Del Piero as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, and of course, there was Totti later on. I think these guys, to me, they were very exciting. They didn't look like they were doing very much throughout the game, to be honest. And when the ball actually got to them, in the advanced areas of the pitch, somehow some magic they would they actually create something out of nothing for the strikers or for their teammates to score, and or maybe even scoring themselves, right? So the thing is, I think these players are really fascinating, and these are the players who actually capture our imagination, and it brought me into the game at least. And you know what? I think there are not so many of these players nowadays, right? Can't really think of many of such type of players.
You mean the number 10 attacking midfielder sort of player, at least?
Yeah, number 10 attacking midfielder. Maybe perhaps we can clarify that a little bit. Maybe number 10 in the sense that of the attacking midfielders, not really a Bergkamp kind of second striker number 10, but more of a attacking midfielder like in the ilk of Rui Costa and Ozil, for the
Mm.
more modern listeners.
Yep.
Yeah,
So someone who not a forward but a midfielder.
exactly.
Yep,
Yes,
yep.
yes.
Yeah, and I think for many people for a long time, probably until recently, maybe the last 10 years or so, before this last 10-year period, the attacking midfielder, the number 10, that seemed to be the most cool, stylish, fun position on the pitch. That's where the glitz and glam was, aside from the forward, the striker, of course. But you mentioned players like Totti, like Rui Costa, like Del Piero, Baggio, Kaká, Riquelme, Aima, players like that. All of those players have this sort of X factor, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in a way I would consider these players more of a luxury item, a
Mm,
luxury player in the team. So you look at someone like Riquelme, who you mentioned a couple of times. He's brilliant, brilliant attacking midfielder, brilliant at holding the ball and creating space just by, little movements here and there, and smart positioning to help, open up space for his teammates to make the killer pass as well. But he doesn't actually do anything in the game, apart from this. And I think in a way, the demand on footballers these days is a lot higher. Footballers in every single position are expected to actually contribute more to the game than previously, right? For example, the goalkeeper, even, right?
mm,
He's not just expected to guard the goal, he's expected to be able to start a move from
mm.
the back.
And
He's
be part of the,
expected
yeah.
to, yeah, expected to be good with his feet.
You mentioned Ozil and luxury player just now, and I think he was like basically the best example of the modern day
Mhm.
luxury player. And just watching Ozil, you can tell he's a magnificent player. Beautiful touches, appreciation of space, so many assists, playmaking, so good. But like what you said with Riquelme and a lot of those other players, maybe they don't contribute so much to the general play, and that's something that modern football needs now. You look at the top teams around Europe now. The City and Arsenal played recently. Arsenal have Martin Odegaard, who, when he was a lot younger, used to play attacking midfielder behind the striker. City obviously have Kevin De Bruyne. They have Bernardo Silva. They have Phil Foden. Yet with all these players, both teams don't actually use them as attacking midfielders or number 10s, not under current management at least. You look at Liverpool. Liverpool haven't played with an attacking midfielder since Steven Gerrard, maybe? Even Coutinho when he came. Coutinho has played on the wing. Bayern sometimes play with an attacking midfielder, but they've not been very good for a while. They've either walked the Bundesliga and not done well in Europe, and this season they've not done well in the Bundesliga at all. But speaking about the Bundesliga, of course, Leverkusen are top playing with two attacking midfielders in Florian Wirtz and Jonas Hoffmann. They are sort of the outlier here. Inter, top of Serie A, play a 3-5-2, no attacking midfielder. Hasan Çalhanoğlu used to be an attacking midfielder, playing as a deep lying playmaker the last couple of years. So yeah, it's sort of a dying breed, the attacking midfielder. Obviously, there are still players. Probably the best example off the top of my head is Bruno Fernandes at Man United.
Mm,
Very good
mm.
player, huge output, but Man United not doing very well. There's an argument that as good as Bruno is, moving forward, United maybe can't be relying on a number 10.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting talking about two things. One, firstly, Bruno, right? He does operate like a number 10, like an attacking midfielder, but he doesn't strike me as the archetypal attacking midfielder because he actually clocks in a lot of running as
Yeah,
well.
he's not the luxury player.
Yeah, he is not that kind of player. Although his attacking style is very attacking midfielder. He looks for the quick through balls. He
Yep.
he looks for his teammates to spread the ball out very, very frequently in the half spaces. He tries to get away from his markers. He stands in front of defenders. In the attacking sense, he's very much like what we are deeming an attacking midfielder, but based on his overall game, he's very much the modern footballer, right?
Yes.
He tracks back, he
Yeah.
defends.
He
Yeah.
doesn't have the archetypal weaknesses that you associate with like an Ozil or James Rodriguez or Mario Götze. But then again, maybe that's why United can play with a 4-2-3-1. It's again arguable if they should or could or need to be continuing, but as of now they are. If you look at the last again, I say 10 years, it's that's sort of a ballpark figure that I've plucked out of the air really. But players like Mesut Özil, like Kai Havertz, Isco, Joao Felix, Mario Götze, James Rodriguez, Dele Alli, Juan Mata, hugely talented players, all of whom dropped off like off a cliff basically.
I think some of them, it might be fair to say that, it is a consequence of being in the Premier League as well. I think the Premier League teams are notorious for being hard running type style, football style teams, right? So really their presence as luxury players is not really that appreciated, I would say. For players like Mata, he goes to a United team post Fergie
Mm-hmm.
that's uh, you
Yeah,
know
yeah.
you could argue that he wasn't really properly used. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because he was like chucked to the right side of midfield most of the time, and he really operated like a inside outside creative
Yeah.
outlet,
But but
which is a bit weird.
but I guess the fact he was chucked there when he was playing number 10 in the hole for Chelsea and won their player of the year twice, 2 or 3 years in a row, and then got moved. I guess the reason is why, because at the time United weren't playing with number 10.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Actually, just came to my mind around the same period of time. Man City were operating with KDB and David Silva. That was not too long ago, right? That
Correct.
they had both of
Yes.
them in like more of a attacking mid positions.
So I guess City, as usual, a bit of an outlier. Again, because at the time they also had Sergio Aguero, and
Hmm.
when you have one of the best goal scorers in the world in your team, I guess having one or two number 10s is a good thing. Which again, like Ozil's, you could say prime Ozil was at Real when he had Ronaldo in front of him.
That's true also. Well, actually, Ozil is, to me personally at least, one of the more exciting players that I've seen actually. When he first burst onto the scene, in the World Cup, I think that was 2010. Yeah, that's when the world got to see him with the German team at the World Cup. But I think he was, at least in his younger days, very, very productive in the attacking midfield position.
Mm-hmm.
He was still quite good for Arsenal, I would say. I'm not sure about his exact stats, but I do get the sense that he was a little underappreciated there.
Yeah, like Ozil, like you said, brilliant. Love watching him play even when he was at Arsenal. Just the touches, the passes that he would pull off. I could go on YouTube and watch a Mesut Ozil compilation for an hour, and it's quite interesting because you mentioned him appearing for Germany alongside Muller and all. So like Ozil, Muller, Götze, Marco Reus. Germany has had a handful of such gifted attacking midfielders, and
Mm.
aside from Götze scoring the winner in a World Cup final, which admittedly huge deal, I don't think any of them has reached the potential which everyone had hoped they would. Those are all the attacking midfielders. Whereas someone like in the same generation, someone like a Philip Lahm, like a Ter Stegen, like Neuer, you wouldn't say they didn't reach their potential, even though they achieved the same things.
Really, you wouldn't say Ozil reached his potential?
I don't think so. I mean, seeing how good he was and how quickly he fell off. But again, the point you brought up earlier about, is it just a sort of byproduct of them suffering for being in the Premier League? Even James Rodriguez, all of them didn't really set the Premier League alight. Ozil for a while, for sure. But then Arteta quickly moved him on. Again, he wasn't the only one moved on, but if your new manager comes in and immediately chucks you aside, I think that speaks volumes about
Mm.
how important his role is to the squad.
Yeah, I think in this case, perhaps it's a circumstances. He's a victim of the circumstances, right, that he was in. It's not exactly that he tried and failed in a way, I would say. Managerial preference for tactics matter as well. But I do
Yeah,
think that your expectations of him are higher than mine. You definitely rate him even higher since you said that, like,
but what I'm
you think he's
saying
a
is that
fail.
I do agree he is a victim of circumstance. But if you come into a team and you're Arteta, who had been assistant to Pep Guardiola for a while, right? Arteta, who played at Arsenal under Wenger with players like Thomas Rosicky and Santi Cazorla.
Hmm.
And now you come to Arsenal, and one of the first things you do is to get rid of one of the world's most gifted attacking midfielders. And I do agree with you that it's because his tactics don't allow for an attacking midfielder. But to me, that's more revealing that a coach at a big club doesn't want to use an attacking midfielder.
I would say it could be a combination of some targets set by upper management, free up a certain amount of salary cap.
Yes, there is definitely that as well. But
Yeah,
I guess it's, if there are so many clubs in the same time span have sort of abandoned the attacking midfielder position, and in almost every example there are other reasons and circumstances as well. It's never just one thing. But I guess it's made easier for Arteta and Arsenal to say that we can get rid of Ozil and free up that salary because we don't really need the attacking midfielder.
yeah, for sure. I can agree with you. But in a way, I wouldn't say that would be Ozil's fault, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it's just the way
it's
it
not
is. Yeah,
it's not his fault at all. And I guess that's the point, because
yeah.
all these attacking midfielders, mostly not their fault that they've declined.
The death of the attacking midfielder.
We mentioned Juan Mata just now, being chucked to the wing. I brought up Marco Reus as a youth, and when he started at Gladbach playing behind the striker, I think he was top scorer for 2 years at Gladbach before he moved to Dortmund. Klopp played 4-2-3-1 sometimes in his Dortmund days, but later moved
Mm.
on to a 4-3-3. And Marco Reus, yeah, one of the best attacking midfielders, got moved to the wing. Other players like Nkunku
Mm.
started as attacking midfielder, became a forward. João Felix, Isco, less successful in moving around, and I guess as a consequence have suffered. Julian Brand, Kevin De Bruyne, Antoine Griezmann all have moved either forward to the wing or deeper into midfield, as in Griezmann's case.
Griezmann was a winger to start with, right?
Yeah,
I
he
think
was a winger, started as a winger at Sociedad. Then
Sociedad, yeah.
I think his last season at Sociedad, he became more central, went to Atletico, played behind the striker, went to Barca. Barca doesn't play for number 10.
Played the wing, yeah.
Yeah, then he sometimes played at the wing, sometimes played as the striker, not very effective. Went back to Atletico. That season was weird. He had a weird loan thing, but what was most telling was how he played for France. Recently, he's been basically playing as a central midfielder. Yeah, and sort of like what Kevin De Bruyne has started doing for City as well under Pep.
What do you think about false nines? You think attacking midfielders, do they get converted to false nines these days,
I
tactics
think I think
wise?
certain managers try to do this, and I it's a bit presumptuous for me to say, but I think some managers are naive in thinking that and any attacking midfielder can play false nine, where it's actually very different because an attacking midfielder is a midfielder that steps up. He may not attack the box like a Dele Alli or Steven Gerrard charges into the box. Frank Lampard, like the Athletic uses the term gate box crasher, whereas someone like a David Silva or Mesut Özil, they do get into the box, but that's not their primary like function. So
Mm,
there are different types. But primarily their starting position is between the lines, right? In the space. And whether to create chances or to finish chances, they start from there. Whereas a false nine, you start higher up and your role is to draw the defenders to you to create space either for your teams, your other teammates, or for yourself. Most famous is Messi, of course. There have been others, and I think the best example of a attacking midfielder being converted to a false nine is Francesco Totti under Spalletti in 2006 for Roma.
I think this was the early 2010s, right?
Mm,
I believe Roma was not playing with any striker at all
yes.
for the season.
Yep.
And Totti was a false nine. He was playing with this guy. I love to mention his name, Simone Perotta up front.
Simone Perotta. Yeah, I think
Yes.
Mancini was one of the wingers. Your question about false nines and attacking midfielders, I think there's a bit of overlap, but not as much as certain people think. Some players definitely can do both, but functionally they're two very different roles.
Yeah, agreed. And I think a player to play false nine does not necessarily have to be like an attacking midfielder, right? I think we can say that, these days the attacking mid is probably not dead, but there's a very high chance that it's dying.
I think they're an endangered species.
Endangered species, yes. I mean, we still see teams that play with attacking mids like Florian Wirtz for Leverkusen. And I think Jude Bellingham plays in an attacking mid kind of role for Real Madrid right now.
Yes, so Bellingham, I think, is sort of a special case, generational talent, and Real almost uniquely play a 4-4-2 diamond, very narrow. Bellingham running in between Vinicius and Rodrigo. So he's playing in the attacking midfielder role, but very often ends up in the forward line. Still definitely a midfielder, but yeah, he's the best example of the highest great attacking midfielder in world football now, for sure. And even
Agreed.
then, when he plays for England, that's not what he does.
Shows you how versatile he is, yeah. And like you said, generational talent.
Yeah, but I guess shows that England with this generation talent under Southgate do not want to use him in the role that he's had the most success with.
Yeah, well, back to Southgate.
Southgate.
Okay, so speaking about tactics, Southgate's tactics for England, how he doesn't use Bellingham properly, I would say. Well, I mean properly in our words, but he probably has his own ideas. How do you think teams these days actually create without this attacking midfield outlet?
I think a lot of modern teams now adopt two basic shapes. The box midfield that Guardiola sort of, I wouldn't say he invented, but he popularized about 18 months ago, where John Stones moved up into midfield. And then, so there are four players in midfield who basically outnumber most other teams and dominate possession and create chances through ball retention. Obviously, having someone like a Kevin De Bruyne and a Phil Foden there makes things much easier to play the
Mm,
killer pass, but it's not through one creator behind the striker anymore. That coupled with the fact that when you're attacking, they generally attack in a 2-3-5 shape. Many times when you watch teams attack, it's two defenders, three players in the midfield line, and five attackers. Even Liverpool do this, and you would think Liverpool and Man City maybe not too similar, but the title winning season would attack with Salah, Mane, Firmino, Robertson, Trent. That's the five. Barca, Bayern, basically every top team aside from Real attack in this shape, and they don't rely on the brilliance of one playmaker anymore, even though they might have a Kevin De Bruyne. It helps, but they rely on sort of its positional play and overloading the channels. That's a big change to how things used to be before, when it used to be one-on-one battles and not hoping but relying on your players to be better than the other team and to conjure up something. Whereas now the system is designed to, yeah.
I think what you're saying in today's tactical setup, what the number that represents the formation starts with, like a 3-5-2, for example, can
Mhm.
actually change once the attack move happens, right? And the number becomes like
Yes.
a 2-3-5 instead.
Yeah. The other big thing is the fact that any team that relies on one attacking midfielder, no matter how gifted, you run the risk of that midfielder being shut down and marked out of the game. Look at United. When Bruno isn't playing well, United don't create anything.
Mm,
Whereas you look at City, who didn't have De Bruyne for almost all of the season, still scores a bucket load of goals, even if Haaland is injured. Modern day systems don't rely on an attacking midfielder, though it's a bonus if you have a good one like De Bruyne. It's very different from what it was before. 90s football was very 4-4-2. Even Wenger was very 4-4-2. People, Arsenal fans
mm.
might not remember the first few Wenger teams were very 4-4-2, like a Ferguson team, and it was just wing play, physical hard work up and down. Not every team in Europe played this way, obviously, but a lot of the big teams outside of Italy played this way. Not to dwell on Man United, because I know we have a habit of doing that, but if you remember, one very famous attacking midfielder that we haven't mentioned is one Sebastian Veron. He left Lazio to go to United in the early 2000s, specifically because Ferguson had realized that a tactical shift was coming and they needed to move away from the 4-4-2 against the better teams. This didn't really work out because Veron never really settled and couldn't really get into the flow. But so many of the United players from that time would tell you how good he was, how gifted and skilled and talented he was. But that had marked the start of English football's maybe dalliance with attacking midfielders since maybe the prominence of a Letitia and Gascoigne in the era before that. That shifted a bit, not because of Jose's Porto, but that marked a big trend where teams started playing 4-2-3-1 instead. That's probably the period where the 4-2-3-1 again, where the attacking midfielder is the main focal point of the attack. The 4-2-3-1, that sort of gave way to more teams playing 4-3-3, generally
Mm.
because of Pep and Barca. Pep's Barca, as brilliant as the players were still more than just the players' talent. It was the system as well. So this has carried on till today. That's why so many teams still use a 4-3-3. And the main difference here is that there's a dedicated defensive midfielder. That has not always been the case in the last 30 years or so. But with the dedicated defensive midfielder, and with so many teams still playing this sort of system, having an attacking midfielder means there's somebody on him all the time. A lot of teams later moved on to a back three, especially when Conte won the Premier League with Chelsea. And earlier we mentioned the box midfield with Pep, but 4-3-3, the 3-5-2, 3-4-3, and the box midfield, all of them have one thing in common, in that aside from having no attacking midfielder, the premise is having superiority in midfield. And if your tactic, if your strategy is to have a playmaker in midfield and your opponent has superiority in midfield, you are going to suffer. And I think that's why the attacking midfielder is, like we said, an endangered species.
And when you talk about superiority in midfield, you're talking about greater numbers, right? Also.
Yeah, greater numbers is I guess the baseline, but
Mm,
also a better shape, like if you have more people, there's more options, more angles, more opportunities to press, to win the ball back, to retain possession. And again, this, I guess, is why a lot of top teams now, the focus has been on creativity coming from deep. This hasn't been a very modern day thing, but more and more
Hmm.
teams now have seemed to have appreciated this. Look at Andrea Pirlo. He had such a long career, but only near the end was he really, really appreciated for being able to dictate the tempo from deep. Xabi Alonso was a similar player, Michael Carrick. But nowadays, someone like a Rodri, he's a different kind of playmaker, different kind of creativity. Definitely not an attacking midfielder, but important to the attack. City don't lose. City win when he's playing. So
Hmm.
that sort of superiority. Going back to the earlier point we made, whereas a defensive midfielder typically is able to battle and take part in the physical duels, many players in the attacking midfielder mold are not.
Yeah, I think it's not a new concept, right? I mean, like you mentioned, Pirlo has been playing in the deep lying role for a long time, since his days with Milan, with Gattuso, and Seedorf protecting him.
The interesting about Pirlo is that he stumbled upon the deep lying role because he went to Bologna when no
Brescia,
Brescia.
Brescia, Brescia, right?
He went to Brescia when Baggio was still playing. And
Hmm.
so the manager couldn't play Baggio and Pirlo at the same time because Pirlo had always been an attacking midfielder when he was younger.
Quite a number of famous names. You mentioned Xabi Alonso, Michael Carrick, Pirlo, but there are also some midfielders who we would consider creative players as well, but not exactly that sort. People like Yaya Toure, for example, people like Steven Gerrard even.
Definitely. And also very different from most of the attacking midfielders. And let's just look at the Steven Gerrard example. He was always a central midfielder, sometimes a defensive midfielder when he was younger. But I think it's fair to say his best football came under Benitez when he was playing an attacking midfielder behind Fernando Torres. But there's a few caveats here. One, he had Mascherano and Xabi Alonso behind him. Liverpool playing a 4-2-3-1. Again, this was that 4-2-3-1 era, and he had a supremely gifted forward in front of him. I'm not dismissing Gerrard's talent, amazing player, but that's one caveat about why he did well there. Yaya Toure also, his peak at Man City was probably before Pep was there. Yaya Toure, a bit like Jude Bellingham, quite a freak of nature in the sense he could do everything. To me, this doesn't show that an attacking midfielder is still the answer. In this case, Yaya Toure is the answer. Yaya Toure is just too good, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the shift in tactics over the years has contributed to the decline of the number 10 for sure. We touched upon this very early on today with Ozil, but it's not so much that all the number 10s and the attacking midfielders in the world can fairly moan about their demise being down to the tactics, but also the fact that many of them, their play styles and their what they contribute to the game has made this tactical shift easier to stomach for everybody. Which is why a
Hmm.
Gerrard, a Yaya Toure, a Kevin Prince Boateng, those teams can still get away with a number 10 because of what they uniquely bring. But if you're someone like James Rodriguez or Mario Götze, who are very good, but they don't bring the same number of tools, of weapons to the fight as a Yaya Toure, then there's more that other players can bring in different positions.
Yep. I completely agree. I think one very recent example that we can see, of an attacking midfielder who is really struggling to get his career back on track is probably Isco. Yep. Make of that what you will. So I think, is the attacking midfielder dead? The answer is probably not yet, but probably soon.
Like we said, endangered species, but there isn't a lot being done to conserve them.
So, what do you think? Do you think the attacking midfielder is dead or not? Or maybe you think that the attacking midfielder is still very much alive? Do drop us maybe a comment or an email even. So you can find the links in the description. So till the next episode, we'll see you.
See you.